It's Thursday, 5 December. Look at that. We're almost finished with the first week of December. 2024. Well, you knew that, but I thought I'd remind you. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. Let's get briefed. Today, we start with reports that Kash Patel, Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI, was targeted in a cyberattack allegedly linked to Iran, marking yet another Trump official that apparently is in the crosshairs of the Islamic regime. We've got the details. Later in the show, France's government collapses following a no-confidence vote against its prime minister, and that's just weeks after the fall of the German government. Plus, just hours after the dramatic martial law declaration, opposition parties are moving to impeach the president of South Korea. And in today's back of the brief, a shocking murder in New York City, right there in Midtown, as the CEO of America's largest insurance provider is fatally shot outside a Manhattan hotel. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. We'll begin with Iran, as we learn of a fresh effort by cyber operatives within the Islamic regime to compromise the communications of members of the incoming Trump administration. Intelligence officials familiar with the situation told CNN on Wednesday that Kash Patel, Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI, was the latest victim of a recent Iranian hack. Now, it was not immediately clear when the hack took place or how successful it was, though anonymous sources said they believe the hackers gained access to at least some of Patel's private communications. A spokesman for the Trump transition team declined to directly comment on the situation, but praised Patel as a key part of Trump's first-term maximum pressure campaign against, quote, the terrorist Iranian regime. As a reminder, Patel served in Trump's National Security Council, serving as an advisor to the acting director of national intelligence, and later as chief of staff to former Defense Secretary Chris Miller. Officials with the FBI, who informed Patel of the breach on Tuesday, also declined to comment, but pointed reporters to a previous statement issued back in August that said they are actively monitoring, quote, activities to compromise former President Trump's campaign by Iran. He's just the latest member, that's Kash Patel, of course, I'm referring to. He's just the latest member of Trump's inner circle to be targeted by Iranian hackers in recent months. Back in June, hackers linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, managed to breach the Trump campaign through a phishing email that targeted Trump ally Roger Stone. They successfully stole internal campaign documents, including a vetting document prepared on Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. The Iranian hackers subsequently distributed the stolen documents to American media outlets and members of the Harris campaign in a brazen attempt to tip the scales of the U.S. presidential election. In late September, the Department of Justice charged 3 Iranian cyber operatives allegedly employed by the IRGC in relation to the hack and leak operation, accusing the trio of attempting to sabotage the presidential election. Now, back in August, Trump attorney Lindsey Halligan was also targeted as part of a separate Iranian hacking effort, though, like the latest incident with Kash Patel, it's unclear if the attempted breach was successful. Additionally, Donald Trump Jr. was notified by the FBI in the lead-up to the presidential election that he was, quote, one of the top targets of Iran. Iran appeared desperate to do everything in their power to prevent Trump from returning to the White House. As I'm sure our listeners are well aware, in addition to cyber attacks, the regime has engaged in multiple assassination plots against Trump and also members of his first administration over the killing of Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani back in 2020 in a drone strike. Trump is reportedly preparing a return to the, quote, maximum pressure campaign against Iran seen during his first term. Transition sources have said he will begin by drastically increasing sanctions on the regime, particularly those aimed at their oil exports, as part of a broader strategy to choke off Iran's financial and military support of terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East. Now, given their history with Trump, the mullahs have every reason to fear his return to the Oval Office in January. Coming up next, the powerhouses of the EU, France and Germany, face political turmoil as both governments collapse, while South Korea's president faces impeachment for just hours after declaring martial law. He declares martial law, and then he says, hey, maybe I was just kidding, and now he's facing impeachment. I'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back to the PDB. All right, turning to Europe. The French government has been toppled after lawmakers voted to oust Prime Minister Michel Barnier in an historic no-confidence vote on Wednesday. Factions across France's political spectrum joined forces to take down the government, throwing the European Union's second-largest economic power into an unprecedented political crisis. Barnier, who will now resign, had served just 91 days as prime minister, marking the shortest tenure of any prime minister in the history of France's republic, after being tapped for the position in September by President Macron. His appointment to the post followed snap elections over the summer that did not yield a clear legislative majority for any single party. Now, France is left without an elected prime minister, and national law stipulates that a new vote cannot be held until next summer. In the meantime, an increasingly unpopular Macron, who has vowed to serve through the end of his term in 2027, will have to quickly tap a replacement to temporarily fill the void. The no-confidence motion passed on Wednesday in the National Assembly, France's lower house of parliament, with the support of 331 lawmakers from both the left-wing New Popular Front Alliance and the right-wing National Rally, far exceeding the necessary threshold of 288 votes. The vote was triggered after Barnier invoked special constitutional powers on Monday to force a controversial budget bill through Parliament without a vote in the lower chamber. After surviving an earlier no-confidence vote back in October, Barnier has led weeks of intense negotiations to bridge the divide between the opposition parties. His budget called for some $63 billion worth of unpopular tax hikes and spending cuts, which he argued was necessary to address France's ballooning budget deficit. Apparently, nobody was buying it. This was the first successful no-confidence vote in France in more than 60 years. Zut alors. The vote leaves the French government in a precarious position, to say the least. The country now has no clear path to a new budget, which threatens to send a jolt through financial markets at a time when the country is already struggling with high debt and flat economic growth. If Macron cannot appoint a new prime minister with the approval of Parliament before the 1st of January and secure the passage of a budget, the government will be unable to meet their financial obligations come the new year. The chaos is good news for Russian President Putin, as it also jeopardizes Macron's plan to ramp up financial support for Ukraine. The nation already fell short of their $3 billion euro pledge to Ukraine for the 2024 fiscal year before the no-confidence vote was initiated. Without a fresh budget, the French military will face an estimated loss of some 3.3 billion euros. France's defense ministry warned that loss will significantly slow the army's ability to order new military equipment, which will, in turn, slow down deliveries to the Ukrainian military. The vote also has broader implications for the stability of the European Union, particularly as the bloc's largest economy, Germany, faces their own political and economic turmoil. In early November, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's three-party coalition government, formed back in 2021, collapsed after he fired the country's finance minister over disagreements on how to revive their shrinking economy. He subsequently scheduled a confidence vote for December 16th, one that he is expected to lose. Now, that would force the German president to dissolve parliament within 21 days and set the path for new parliamentary elections, scheduled to be held by February 23rd. Okay, shifting to South Korea. Opposition parties launched an historic impeachment motion against President Yoon Suk-yeol following his short-lived declaration of martial law that plunged the country into political turmoil, setting the stage for a high-stakes showdown in parliament. The impeachment motion, submitted jointly by the opposition Democratic Party and 5 smaller parties, could be voted on as early as Friday. Now, for it to pass, the motion requires a 2/3 majority in the 300-seat parliament, meaning at least 8 lawmakers from the president's ruling People Power Party must support it. If passed there, then 6 of the 9 justices on the Constitutional Court would have up to 180 days to determine whether to uphold it. That's a decision that could strip the president of his powers and elevate the prime minister as acting president. For background, President Yoon's martial law declaration on Tuesday night stunned the nation, and of course it was short-lived, bringing heavily armed troops to encircle the National Assembly and triggering chaos in the streets of Seoul. As we reported on the PDB, lawmakers scaled walls to re-enter the building and swiftly voted unanimously to nullify the order, calling it unconstitutional. The vote forced President Yoon to rescind the declaration that lasted, well, almost 6 hours by early Wednesday morning. In his defense, the president described the declaration as essential to, quote, protect the nation from ruin and eradicate, quote, anti-state forces, criticizing the Democratic Party's efforts to impeach government officials and senior prosecutors and urging the public to place trust in his leadership. It's important to note that South Korea's constitution allows the president to declare martial law in, quote, wartime, warlike situations or comparable national emergencies, permitting military restrictions to maintain order. However, many South Koreans and international observers question whether such conditions currently exist. The fallout has been swift and severe, with opposition leaders denouncing the president's actions as a, quote, grave act of rebellion and demanding his immediate resignation. Critics have likened the move to South Korea's authoritarian past, marking the first instance of martial law since the country transitioned to democracy in the late 1980s. Meanwhile, President Yoon's People Power Party remains divided. While the party leadership pledged to block the impeachment motion, 18 members joined the unanimous vote to overturn the martial law decree, signaling, well, potential fractures. Opposition leaders are counting on these divisions to secure the necessary votes to pass the motion. Adding to the chaos, President Yoon's senior policy advisors and defense minister offered to resign. The Democratic Party has also filed a separate impeachment motion against the defense minister, accusing him of recommending the martial law declaration. A parliamentary lawyer has called for the president's immediate suspension, arguing that the public needs stability during the crisis. If the impeachment motion succeeds and is upheld by the Constitutional Court, President Yoon would become the second South Korean president removed from office in less than a decade. In that case, a new election would need to be held within 60 days. As the world watches this dramatic political standoff unfold, questions loom about whether South Korea's democratic institutions can withstand the strain or whether President Yoon's presidency will survive the mounting backlash. All right, coming up next in the back of the brief, a murder mystery in Manhattan where the CEO of United Healthcare was gunned down by a masked gunman. I'll have the details when we come back. In today's Back in the Brief, a shocking shooting in Midtown Manhattan Wednesday as Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Health's insurance division, was gunned down outside a hotel in what NYPD is calling a, quote, targeted attack. Now, the shooting happened just before 7 in the morning when a masked gunman lying in wait near the Hilton Hotel ambushed Thompson as he approached the entrance where the United Health Group was holding its annual investors conference. The NYPD commissioner confirmed that the suspect ignored other pedestrians, focusing solely on Thompson before firing multiple shots. The gunman then fled the scene on an electric city bike, vanishing into Central Park. Investigators are treating the killing as a calculated assassination. NYPD Chief of Detectives Joe Kenny described the suspect as highly proficient with firearms, noting that a brief weapon malfunction was swiftly cleared before more shots were fired. Thompson was struck in the back and calf, and he was pronounced dead shortly after being rushed to Roosevelt Hospital. And shortly after the shooting, Thompson's wife, Paulette, told reporters that her husband said that he'd received threats in the weeks leading up to the assassination, but she didn't disclose specific details. She told NBC News, quote, "I just know that he said there were some people that had been threatening him," adding that the NYPD confirmed to her that they believed it was a, quote, targeted attack. Now, Mayor Eric Adams sought to reassure New Yorkers, emphasizing that this was not a random act of violence, adding to the NYPD's confirmation, quote, "It appears as though this was a targeted murder," adding that the public safety remains a top priority. Well, that's nice. The suspect is described as a white male, wearing a dark jacket, a black face mask, black and white sneakers, and carrying a backpack. Detectives are working with Citi Bike to trace the assailant's movements using the GPS trackers equipped on the bikes. The investigation also includes extensive reviews of social media, of course, interviews with Thompson's family and colleagues, and the exploration of possible motives. As the manhunt continues, no arrests have been made, and questions linger about the circumstances that led to the high-profile killing of one of the healthcare industry's most prominent executives. All right. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, 5 December. Now, if you have any questions or comments, or maybe even humorous anecdotes, well, just reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And of course, to listen to the show ad-free, should you be inclined, become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker. I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.